And then I wonder if I can get this one here.
You may not get that one. It's okay.
Okay. And
There you go.
I got a letter. I made a copy of that letter. See?
Oh yeah.
This is Kathy Lang. It's November 15th, 2002. We're at the Harrison Library in Harrison, Ohio. We're interviewing Pam Rofles today. Pam, if you could tell us where you were born and when, and how you came to be in World War II.
Okay, I was born in West Harrison, Indiana, August 1st, 1922. And I enlisted in the Navy with a buddy of mine. And we went to Great Lakes for naval training, which lasted about 7 days. I was sent home for 3 days and then sent back to Norfolk, Virginia, where they shipped me aboard a USS destroyer, the USS Boyle DD-600. And I spent the rest of my enlistment service on that ship. And we were instrumental. Our ship was instrumental in the invasion of North Africa in 1942. We were the lead ship. I think because we had a division commander on there. Our division commander had 8 destroyers in his command, and our destroyer was sent out to meet an American submarine off the coast of North Africa, and we were to signal the convoy. If everything was okay, we would signal the convoy, and when that convoy came together, it looked like New York City. And they made the invasion at Fidelia in North Africa, and very little resistance on the landing in North Africa that we encountered. Most of the resistance we got when we got in Casablanca, the big harbor there, German submarine, 2-man submarines were in there, and they were sinking ships right and left, you know. But that was basically what happened in invasion of North Africa. We weren't concerned. In Casablanca, the Free France scuttled the USS, the French Richelieu, the new battleship the French had there, and they scuttled it so they couldn't operate against the American forces. And that was a big instrumental in the resistance being very light there in North Africa. We continued to support that invasion, and back and forth, we escorted convoys back and forth through the Mediterranean. Most of my time in the Navy was spent in the Mediterranean in support of different operations that we encountered in that. One of the interesting invasions was the invasion of Sicily, and I think maybe you've read something about it, where we shot down a lot of American paratroopers. I think we shot down 28 of our own planes. And the reason that happened was all the commanders, they had a big meeting that they considered any planes flying over this convoy were be considered enemy planes. And the pilots, American pilots, got lost, flew over the convoy, and all the ships there just opened up on them, and they shot down 28 of our own planes. I don't know how many casualties resulted from that, but I'm sure there were a lot. And then we supported General Patton's Army, 3rd Army, in the invasion of Sicily, all the way up until that operation was over, and then we were in invasion of southern France, and all up through supported with firepower up there. One of the interesting things that happened to us up there, our skipper was kind of nosy, and the Germans had that big railroad gun up there in Anzio, and he goes sneaking in there. He wanted to get a look at how close we could get. Well, when they started plopping them big 26-inch shells over the top of us, he didn't waste no time getting out of there. We were on a very lucky ship. What we went through, we were very lucky. I remember we all rode, we tried to get transferred off of it. We put in for submarine duty and everything else. but I stayed on that ship till it was decommissioned. And one of the interesting things, one of the fellows on that ship, his mother wrote him back, says, "You stay on that ship. You were on a lucky ship. You were on a lucky ship." And we were very lucky what some of the engagements we went through. One time we were in New York and for repairs, and we got a call that they sighted a German submarine off the coast of Bermuda. And so we left New York for Bermuda, and we patrolled around there, and early in the morning we made contact with that submarine, and we dropped all kind of depth charges all morning long, and then we just patrolled around there, and about 5 o'clock in the afternoon that submarine surfaced, and all the Germans, the crew jumped off, and they blew up the submarine, and we picked up, I think, 48 members, and then there was another destroyer escort came down later on in that afternoon and helped us patrol, and they picked up some of the crew too. And one of the interesting things was when we'd come back into New York after going over there and come back in for repairs or whatever, that crew was working in the PX there, and you know, they had really good duty. We treated our prisoners pretty good when we captured them and brought them back to New York in the United States. And after the war with Germany was over, we were sent to the Pacific coast in San Diego, and they took all our torpedo tubes off of the ship and put all anti-aircraft guns on it, and then we went from there to Okinawa, and on the way out we passed Guam, and we'd bombard them islands on the way out until we got to Okinawa, and we escorted the USS Pennsylvania, the battleship. It had been damaged in the war out there, and she was going back into duty, and we just got to Okinawa, and she got hit by kamikaze planes as soon as she got out there and was anchored, and then we served out there, and from Okinawa and then all the way into Japan. Some of the history here is on this plaque that I have. And then when Japan surrendered, we occupied the Rufles Islands, and the Japanese were supposed to have their guns all out there, and then the CBs or engineers went over and destroyed all their guns. And when we got done with occupying the Rufles Islands, we came back through the Panama Canal again, and the ship was decommissioned in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina. And that's when I was discharged from the Navy in South Carolina.
What was your job on board the ship, Pam?
I was assigned a number 2 fire room, and we had served 4 hours on duty and 8 off. You know, we had three crews that ran the fire room. There was 2 fire rooms, number 1 fire room, number 2 fire room, number 1 engine room, and number 2 engine room. We were in the engineers force on the destroyer. Yeah.
Then you only received 7 days of training.
7 days of training. I wouldn't call it much training. I'm not going to put this in there on my 7 days. I was just up there and probably just to get uniformed and shots and sent home. And our ship was selected. It was just one of the new ships. It came down. It was launched in Casco Bay, built in Casco Bay, Maine, and it went through the shakedown cruise up there, and then it was sent to Norfolk, and that's where I picked it up. I wasn't involved in the shakedown cruise up. It was a fairly new ship. It was a new ship just built, you know, and I guess one of the other ships that was supposed to do what we did, something happened to it, and then we were signed to take its place, and that's how we got involved in the invasion of North Africa.
So you were in almost every major battle, in every theater in the war.
Yes, yes.
What did you think was the most intense of all those battles that you were involved in?
Well, I would consider them all just about the same, you know. We had to prepare for all of them just about the same. Probably the most devastating one was going into the Pacific, where the Japanese were using suicide planes to sink American ships, you know. And one of the worst things in the Pacific was riding out the typhoons. We rode out about 5 typhoons out there, and there was about 5 destroyers were sunk by these typhoons. And that was kind of a scary duty, just riding out that rough weather, you know, when they sank 5 destroyers.
You were a kid from a little town in Ohio and probably never were away from home before. Was this a big shock to you to see the world and meet people from everywhere?
It was, and what really was kind of, I was a loner. I had the buddy I enlisted with, he went one way and I went the other way, and I was the only one that I didn't know anyone. You know, I was by myself more or less, just out of high school, more or less by myself. I ran into one of my buddies. We were in Boston after coming back for repairs. We were in Boston Navy, and we had Liberty, and I run into, the only person I ever ran into from my hometown was in the Marines, and he had just come back from Iwo Jima, you know. And he asked me what I was going to do. I said, well, we're going out on the town. He said, well, I'm going to a party. And I said, well, come down and see me on the ship tomorrow, you know. And when he came down there on that ship, and we were in there for repairs, and he just back from Iwo Jima, one of these yard workers had a chipping hammer, and when he went to use it, it sounded like a machine gun going off, you know. My buddy, he's gone. When he heard that, he left. I never saw him again. You know, chipping hammer sounded like a machine gun. He just come back from Okinawa, you know, and that was the end of him. He was gone. Yeah. So that was kind of something, you know, that you run into, where you hear people got shell-shocked, and what some of these people had to go through, you know, to rehabilitate themselves, you know. And it was a worldwide experience. I was all over the world. We went to North Ireland several times. 3 trips to Ireland and England. We escorted convoys back and forth to England. I remember one time the Queen Mary was in New York, and we were assigned to escort it back to England. And a lot of guys on the ship says, how long are we going to be gone? They said about 6 months. Well, a lot of them shaved their hair all the way off and everything else. It took us 3 days to take that ship back to England, and 3 days to come back to New York. That was a short 6 months that they ever witnessed, you know. We had, our skipper got killed on I think, when we captured that German submarine. A shell ricocheted and killed our skipper. We buried a lot of people that we picked up at sea. We buried one of our skippers at sea. I think we had Lieutenant Carp was the first one, and let's see, I can't remember them all. The one that served on the ship the most, and I can remember, was Benjamin Fields. We called him Benny Fields. And we talked about him in our last reunion pretty much, you know, and a lot of the guys that were on that ship with me said he was a good skipper. He saved our ship, you know, especially when we were out there in them typhoons. But he was a very strict officer, and he ran a tight ship. And he'd go around and inspect it almost daily, you know. And one of the stories I can remember about him, when we were down in the Caribbean escorting ships down there in the Caribbean, I can still see him up on the forecastle with a .45 shooting at flying fish. I don't think he ever hit any. But he had target practice up there every day shooting at flying fish when down in the Caribbean. But he was something else, Denny Fields. One of our skippers, I heard afterwards, got killed on the Orient Express. After he retired from the Navy, he was assigned some kind of duty with our government. And they tell me, some of my shipmates told me he got killed in the Orient Express. Lieutenant Commander Carp. But it's an experience you'll never forget.
What were conditions like on the ship for the sailors?
I thought they were very good, better than it being in a muddy foxhole. You know, we had our own locker, our own bunk, and we had a chow room where we had chow, but being in the Navy and in the fire room, we'd done a lot of our own cooking. You know, we would scrounge food and drop it down, and we'd cook our own food down there. And you had to know the kind of crew you were on. We had some guys that were good scroungers that bring food down, and we'd fry our potatoes and onions and all that. But they had where we'd go to chow every 3 times a day, you know, and breakfast, dinner, and lunch and dinner, you know. So it was Navy is a little bit different than the Army, a lot different than the Army, you know. They had to eat out of cans and live in all kind of conditions. We were kind of protected, you know. You could get out of the weather. But, the duty was on a destroyer. You thought maybe was when you came back like Cape Hatteras, you were in the roughest water in the world, and you thought maybe you was on a submarine sometimes with being on a destroyer, you know. But it was I would say it was good duty during the war.
You thought you were treated well. You thought your leadership was good.
Yeah, we was treated very well, and we had clean quarters. We had our clothing was always, we'd send it to the laundry. It was always clean, you know. We had our own laundry, and so it was our duty. We kept pretty clean, you know, and the ship was kept very clean.
Well, I think your friend's mom was right. You were on a lucky ship.
Yeah, we were on a very lucky ship. We only got hit once, and no severe damage at all. It just put some holes in the smokestack. But we were over in the Mediterranean, where the Germans turned a lot of them mines loose, floating mines. You know, we went through them and things, and you could see these mines floating. They was up there shooting at them, trying to set them off, you know. So, but that's that was an experience when they turned them mines loose.
Was the damage to your ship from an airplane?
No, from guns, shrapnel from a gun. Yeah.
From shore?
Yeah, from shore. Yeah.
Did you lose many of your crewmates there on the ship?
No, no one was ever killed except the skipper got killed. No crewmates ever got killed. Maybe one or two of them got wounded with shrapnel. But some of them, you know, we'd go into, we'd come back and then to transfer some of them off, and we'd get new personnel all the time. The ship had carried a complement of about 315 people during the wartime, during war, but that complement changed hands several times. You know, we'd come in, maybe 5 or 6 would get transferred off, and we'd get 5 or 6 new ones or whatever, you know. So we constantly had new people coming on and off all the time.
So you got on the ship in 1942, and when were you off? 1946?
Let's see, I was discharged in December 8, 1945.
So you went through some of these huge convoys of these amphibious landings, and that must have been something to see.
Well, we had escorted them convoys. The biggest one was when we invaded North Africa, when we had signaled the convoys to come in, that everything was okay. It looked like New York City coming in there, all them ships. I don't know how many was involved in that landing, and and of course the lucky thing about it, there was little resistance to that landing where we landed, and but there was a lot of activity. One of the most interesting things when we was over in the Mediterranean, and I think that's the prettiest body of water in the world, the Mediterranean. We would support the troops with firepower on land, and then at night we would go out so the Germans couldn't find these ships. We would escort these big cruisers, and all the destroyers would go out in the Mediterranean, and then the next day we'd come in and support them with firepower. One of the most interesting things was at night, every night we'd have general quarters while we would go out, and the Germans would fly around. We could see the planes, but they would fly out of range, And this one night, we had just secured our ship from general quarters, and all the firemen, I was in the fire room, we'd come topside, and the ship, the destroyer on our starboard side, we was sitting there, and all at once it said, boom, boom, a 5-inch gun went off, and one of these German planes was sneaking in on the water level, was going to lay a torpedo into it, but they got it before it got there, That was something to see, that was kind of a scary thing. But that, I could write all kind of activity going on with that ship I was on. It went all over the world, and
were you guys allowed to get off at certain places for
oh yes,
some R&R, and you got to see towns and cities? And
we would go into, like when we was in the Mediterranean, we'd go in the Isle of Capri, and we'd take on supplies, and we'd have liberty there, we had liberty in Sicily. We was over in Sicily a lot during that invasion. We had liberty there. We had liberty in Naples, and southern France, and at Nice, Monte Carlo, different places. We were able to get off, not long, maybe for just overnight or whatever, Yeah.
And you were received pretty well by people all over the world as an American sailor?
We didn't have no problem, yeah. We had no, in North Africa, it was kind of different there, We'd get ashore in North Africa, but we never had no problem with the native people at all.
It must have been quite an adventure for a kid from Harrison, Ohio.
It was, and of course, the crew I was with was something else too, I kind of told you the story when I first went aboard ship. There was this guy was in charge of the number 2 fire room. He was just on the what ship was that? What did I say he was on? Anyway, he was on a ship that the Japanese tried to sink about 7 or 8 times, and it got back to New York, and then he was transferred onto this destroyer that I was on, and to go see a guy who was all tattooed up. He had tattoos, big eagle on his chest, Statue of Liberty on his back, big dotted line on his neck, and cut on the dotted line, and his arms all tattooed up. It was something to see, but he was a great guy, and he knew what he was doing, and he was a great one to learn what to do on that ship, So I had a lot of good crewmates when I was on that ship.
And you've kept in touch with them, you still go see them on a regular basis?
Yeah, we have a reunion every year. We've had reunions in South Carolina, Florida, New Hampshire, Virginia, Louisville, Kentucky, Dayton, Ohio. My wife says, Dayton, Ohio? Wonder how they're going to get the ships to Dayton, Ohio. But we did. You know, you have to have somebody from there that's going to host it, you know, and the guy from Dayton, Ohio, he wanted to host one up there. Well, it was turned out to be a very interesting reunion. The last one we had, we took a cruise on and there was getting slimmer. We only had 21 of our old crew mates there, and I can name 9 of them that didn't come for one reason or another. But so the next one's going to be next year. We're going to Branson, Missouri. That'll be something else. Yeah.
Getting the ships there too, huh?
Yeah.
Have you always been a sailor ever since? Always liked to be on the sea?
No, I wasn't a water dog, you know. When my days of sailing was over, I was done with the water, done swimming or whatever. I wasn't involved in getting a boat. My kids have boats and all that. But when I left that ship, that was enough water for me.
Did a lot of people have trouble with seasickness and getting their sea legs?
Oh yes, we had an old timer on that ship that I was on, and every time, and he's been in the Navy for I don't know 18 years or whatever, and every time that ship went out, he got deathly sick. And I can remember one guy and especially, we were going to England, and we were taking a convoy to England. Well, it took, you know, zigzagging back and forth. It was a slow convoy. It took us several days to get over there, and he couldn't eat nothing but crackers and water. And when he got to England, they transferred him back to the United States by plane or whatever, you know, but that person, he did get deathly sick, you know. And you would get, a lot of them would get sick. After I was on it for a while, you got used to it, you know, because on that ship you were on, when you were at sea, you were constantly in motion, you know. You were constantly in motion, and but you would get used to it. Most of them get used to it. Some of them never did get used to it, you know. And they kind of screen them out and send them to another place, wherever, you know.
Was there anything else you would like to tell us or future Americans about your time in the war?
No, really. It's an experience I'll never forget. But it's in the past now.
And you came back home and continued to serve your country, Mayor of Harrison, for 25 years.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking with us today.
Oh, I enjoyed it, yeah. Thank you.